whatever happens in the future, who knows which administration it will be? I guess time will tell.
It's most unfortunate that the Republicans have decided that they will not respect the will of the people.
The administration in any way, by failure to recognize this as our win, does not change the dynamic at all what we're able to do.
After a series of defeats in court, the Trump campaign mounts legal challenges to delay the certification of election results, with the president persisting that he won and vowing not to concede. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Ghida Fakhry. As President Trump continues to dispute election results, his legal team has failed to provide sufficient evidence of widespread voter fraud and suffered a string of setbacks in court. After Joe Biden's late but decisive electoral college win, with projected victories in Georgia, Arizona, and several battleground states that Trump won in 2016, the president has accused Democrats of trying to steal the election. And while Trump repeated his claims that the election was rigged, thousands of his followers gathered in Washington, D.C. in a strong show of support for the president, whose refusal to concede has alarmed Democrats on Capitol Hill. Most Republican lawmakers continue to support Trump's legal claims, with only a few senators congratulating President-elect Biden, who continues to be denied access to intelligence briefings provided to all presidents-elect. Amid the political uncertainty and confusion, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has voiced concerns about attempts to politicize the military following a series of firings at the Pentagon.
We do not take an oath to a king or a queen, a tyrant or a dictator. We do not take an oath to an individual. No, we do not take an oath to a country, a tribe, or a religion. We take an oath to the Constitution.
With over 2 months until the inauguration of the next president-elect, the next political battle is in Georgia, where 2 Senate race runoffs will determine which party controls the Senate. Joining me now is Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones, a longtime Democrat who spoke at the Republican National Convention in support of President Trump. Representative Jones, Biden scored a decisive electoral college win. In fact, he got 306 votes when he only needed 270 to win. He has over 5 million more votes than President Trump. He managed to flip several states, including your state, Georgia, which has undergone a recount. Lawsuits in many states, including Georgia, are being dropped or dismissed and thrown out of court. Is it time for all Americans, those who support Trump and those who don't, to accept this reality and move on?
Well, let me be clear about this. The media does not state who is elected and who's not elected. That is done by the electoral process. And at the appropriate time, they will declare who gets those electoral votes. However, this president, just like any other candidate, has a right to follow the process in terms of challenging the votes, challenging the process. And I think that's what is happening right now. It can be done state by state or by legal terms, or legal initiative.
Well, he can challenge the vote, but election officials, as you know, across the United States say they have found no evidence of widespread voter fraud that would ultimately affect the outcome of the election. Isn't this just a frivolous, a futile attempt to change the outcome of the election?
No, what we are finding, though, is that we have people who are dead who have voted. That's voter fraud. I should say that's election fraud. We are seeing people, or when you look at the poll watchers who've been told they cannot watch as the count take place. They were locked out. There's some other irregularities as well. So again, we believe in a fair and transparent election. The process will go through at the appropriate time. When the Electoral College determines who is the president, then that's who we'll go with. In the meantime, it's just mere speculation. And there are lawsuits that are still going on. And as we speak right now, there are recounts that are still going on. And there are audits that's being pursued by some, because an audit of the machines and the hardware and the software is totally different from the vote count.
Well, there are recounts going on, but as you know, these recounts aren't going to change the reality. In Georgia alone, Biden won by 14,000 votes. And when you look at the historic data, since 2000, there have been 31 statewide recounts, and only 3 of those resulted in election reversals, with the original margin being 0.5%, which is not the case here. You also mentioned that there were irregularities. There always are. But are they enough to put the election results into doubt. The Department of Homeland Security as well said this was the most secure election in American history.
Well, last time I checked, the Homeland Security Office have not gone to the local levels and gone to precincts or gone to areas or counties where they count the votes. That's not their job. It's left up to the states to conduct the elections, not the federal government.
Well, hold on. The body in charge of looking into the election said there is no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes, changed votes, or was in any way compromised. How do you nullify hundreds of thousands of votes in several states? No amount of recount is going to change that reality, is it?
Well, to speak to that, in Georgia, just recently, the president has picked up over 800 more votes. So again, the recount is still going on. The Office of Homeland Security does not get involved into the recounts. The Office of Homeland Security does not get involved at the local level. They're looking at broad. You remember, if you go back, Office of Homeland Security said that the elections were being interfered by the Russians, but the Obama administration did nothing about it, but they said there was nothing going on. So I don't want to get into the weeds on that. I will say this, we're just looking, this is not a third world country. We have an election process. And there's no room at any time, or should we ever accept irregularities, just to say, oh, well, we have these all the time.
You've been accusing Democrats of fraud, but it is Republican lawmakers that have been pressuring state officials to throw out ballots that were cast legally. Georgia's Republican Secretary of State said Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican, asked him to look for ways to throw out mail-in ballots. So this is a Republican accusing another Republican of blatant fraud.
Well, I've seen Democrats accuse Republicans and Democrats accuse Democrats of fraud when they don't win the election. So I don't want to get into the accusations. I will say this, as a state elected official for the state of Georgia, I represent constituents who voted both for Joe Biden and both for President Trump. However, they deserve and they expect from me, and it's my duty and responsibility to pursue every area, every avenue where I believe there could be voter fraud or election fraud. So I will fight for that.
But do you accept that the margin is too big to overturn these results?
I do not accept that.
Well, the majority of Americans think this is over. A recent poll found that 79% of Americans believe Biden won, only 13% believe the election has not yet been decided, and just 3% said Trump won.
Well, the media said that President Trump was guilty of Russian collusion. Went on for 3.5 years, destroyed his reputation. At the end of the day, there was no Russian collusion. So this has been led by the media. They shape the narrative. Again, Georgia has not completed its voter recount until that is done, and every other avenue has been exhausted by those who feel like they can challenge the process. At that point in time, we'll be happy to accept the election results.
Do you accept the other results in down-ballot elections, Representative, that gave Trump allies a win in both Senate and House races? Do you accept those results?
Well, if you want to talk about those results, where's the blue wave? The House, matter of fact, the Republicans picked up 11 plus seats in the House. Now, where's the blue wave? In the legislature.
No, hold on, but do you accept those results? Do you accept those results?
Well, I'm not in those states. But if the candidate is challenging those results, then I support that candidate until his process has been exhausted. So that's what I keep referring to. It's not about the candidate. It's about the people and a free and a transparent election. And our Constitution guarantees us to follow the process. Elections have been overturned. Just look to Al Gore. Al Gore was declared the winner. It was all printed in the newspaper. Everybody says the case. Did the Supreme Court rule on it? No, but when they did rule on it, where did it go? It was overturned. And Al Gore lost the election. That's why I like
that was a very different case. This was a case that hinged on one state, Florida, with 537 votes, not hundreds of thousands of votes, as is the case here in several states. Let me just ask you this finally. Let me ask you this. You aren't just alleging fraud, accusing Democrats of, quote, stealing the elections. You've been saying that you are ready for a political gunfight, getting ready to, quote, start shooting. Aren't you setting up the stage for political violence? Is this responsible language?
Shooting is a metaphor. In other words, when we see fraud, we're going to fight fraud. We're going to start metaphorically, not physically. Matter of fact, if you've been following what I was saying we're not like Antifa. We're not like Black Lives Matter. We don't kill people. We don't shoot people. We don't burn businesses. We don't burn Black businesses. We don't tear up public or private property. So let's see where the violence.
But at a
has
time
been.
like this, when there
like
is
this,
tension and violence in the country, do you regret using these words?
No, what I regret is that you and others won't hold Joe Biden accountable for calling anti-val, who has a record of violence, won't call Black Lives Matter out, who has a record of violence. I was in Washington, D.C. this weekend at the big rally this past weekend. Look at the violence that broke out that started to attack Trump supporters. I do not see you or any other organizations reporting that information, how they destroyed people's property, how they were attacking people, including seniors. Now, that's true violence.
We have
you have not asked Joe Biden to denounce that. Can you tell me?
We will when we speak to him. We're speaking with you,
he's in the basement,
Jones.
right? So he won't come out because he's in the basement.
Well, he isn't quite in the basement. We'll have to leave it here, though. Georgia State Representative Vernon Jones, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, too.
From Georgia to Pennsylvania, a state that President Trump won in 2016 but lost in 2020 by over 68,000 votes, a state which sealed Biden's win. The Trump campaign has launched a series of lawsuits claiming that hundreds of thousands of votes weren't properly processed. The campaign is seeking a temporary restraining order barring the state from certifying its election results. It has also tried to invalidate mail-in ballots received after Election Day. But a U.S. Court of Appeals upheld the state's 3-day deadline extension to accept mail-in ballots, and the State Department said that just 10,000 mail ballots could be affected, a number that would not impact the final result. For more on the legal battles in Pennsylvania, I'm joined by Republican State Representative Don Kiefer. Representative Kiefer, to put it bluntly, Trump's legal efforts in Pennsylvania aren't going very well. Lawsuits have been thrown out of court. 3 Trump lawyers dropped out of a case ahead of the scheduled hearing. His new attorney admitted that there are no bombshells that could derail the Biden presidency. Yet, you and other state Republicans have called for an audit of the election to see if it was carried out fairly and lawfully. Have you found any substantial evidence that this wasn't the case?
So our process is just going through to make sure that everything took place as it should. So we had voters that were turned away. We had polling locations that ran out of provisional ballots. So that meant people couldn't vote. They had to go to the counties if they were able to do that to vote. We have instances where people were told they had already voted. We have instances where some municipalities were counting beforehand, some were counting afterwards. Some municipalities were calling voters, allowing them to come in and correct their ballots, while 60 counties weren't allowing them to do that. So this is about the process and the procedure. We're not looking into the results and voter fraud that would have to go through the courts and that would have to be litigated.
But you do mention some instances. Are these instances enough to overturn around, or actually more than 70,000 votes that Biden won in Pennsylvania? And look at the facts. The Secretary of State's office said that claims of election fraud have been debunked and that all parties had canvassers in all counties. One Trump lawyer admitted in court that the president had, quote, non-zero number of people in the room, so there was representation. Another Trump attorney even told the Pennsylvania judge that he doesn't have evidence of voter fraud. Even Trump's lawyers aren't standing by these allegations. Why are you?
I'm not standing by the allegations of voter fraud. My issue, again, is the chaos and confusion of the elections. So when voters are disenfranchised, that's not a partisan issue. And that's what we're looking at. It was completely chaotic. I was working with our counties. I serve 2 counties. So I was talking to my one county constantly about the rules and what they could and couldn't do, and what one precinct was allowing while another polling location wasn't allowing it. So we're looking at those things, like what do we correct going forward? So this is, again, what our efforts are about the procedure and process. We're not talking about voter fraud and overturning the election. That wasn't the point of this. The point of it was, how was it facilitated? Was it fair? Was it equitable? Did it follow the law? Which we know it did not follow the law in many instances.
Well, you say that, but 16 assistant U.S. attorneys assigned to monitor any wrongdoing in the election said they had not seen evidence of any substantial anomalies. They served as district election officials. They would know.
Right. But Justice Scalia, right, he gave an opinion, and we had our Secretary of State, right, was allowing an additional 3 days for ballots to come in. And he came in and said, you don't have the authority to allow those additional 3 days. So there are...
Hold on, but these additional 3 days were allowed by the state Supreme Court. In fact, just a few days ago, this was upheld by an appeals court.
This was in addition to those 3 days that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court wrote statute, which they don't have the authority to do, by adding those 3 days, but she was allowing another 3 days for ballots to come in and be corrected. So that was in addition to what the Supreme Court had allowed.
Okay, but looking at the situation as it stands today, just a handful of Republican leaders have actually congratulated the president-elect. This is what Biden has said.
I think that the whole Republican Party has been put in a position, with a few notable exceptions, of being mildly intimidated by the sitting president.
Doesn't this denial and obstructionism hurt the Republican Party and ultimately American democracy?
So again, that is not my issue, and the election hasn't been certified in Pennsylvania. So we're not even sworn in, and we can't be sworn in until the elections are certified, which will not happen until the second week of December. So there is a process that has to go before the courts, before our Secretary of State and our governor to sign everything in and certify the election. So that process hasn't even completed yet. So to say, oh, everything needs to be done, and we need to say, oh, conceding, you've won, and this is the process, that hasn't always been the case. We saw that with the Bush-Gore election, right? There's a process that has to play out. So allow the process to play out.
All right, Representative Dawn Keefer, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure, thank you.
Now, with nearly all of Trump's legal challenges being defeated in court and the December 8th deadline for resolving all legal disputes fast approaching, some of the president's allies are suggesting that Republican lawmakers should ignore the popular vote in states won by Biden and hand their electoral college votes to Trump instead. The Constitution gives state legislatures the power to determine, quote, the manner in which electors are appointed to the Electoral College, which is made up of 538 people who will meet on December 14th in each state to formally elect the president. More than 30 states have laws that specify that the winner of the statewide popular vote should be entitled to the state's presidential electors. So, can Republican state legislatures pick electors to vote for Trump, or is this a far-fetched scenario? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Lawrence Tribe, University Professor of Constitutional Law at Harvard University and co-author of the book To End a Presidency, The Power of Impeachment. Professor Tribe, it's great to have you with us. You were the lead counsel for Vice President Gore in Bush versus Gore in that case in 2000. Although President Trump said more than once that he would litigate all the way up to the Supreme Court and would ultimately get the presidency that way, is it wishful thinking on his part? Is there any similarity between 2000 and 2020?
There really is none. In 2000, the entire election hinged on 537 votes in the state of Florida. There was a recount going on, and the question was whether, under Florida law, the recount had to stop by December 12th because of the mechanics of our electoral college system. The US Supreme Court said it had to stop. Enough is enough. Although I didn't agree with that result, that was nothing like this. At this point, Vice President Biden, the president-elect of the United States, is ahead by tens of thousands of votes in the key states. There's nothing in the world that can be done that will reverse that result other than running a new election, and that's not possible under American law.
Before the election in 2016, you predicted a similar scenario playing out to what we're seeing today. You said that candidate Trump was, back then, twisting the knife ever deeper into the very heart of our body politic. Judge after judge has already dismissed the legal filings of the Trump campaign. His legal team must know this is a failing strategy. Why are they still going down that route?
I think they're doing it because they have been instructed by Donald Trump to keep that knife twisting as long as they can, even if it injures the democracy. He clearly intends to have influence on our politics after he is out of office. He said he wants to run in 2024. He wants the narrative to be that the election was somehow stolen from him. And the only way to keep that up is to continue battling in court, even if he continues losing. He's lost something like 19 out of 20 court challenges. None of them is going to succeed. The lawyers who are representing him, I think, are going right to the very edge of the legal ethics that our system prescribes. by bringing what they must know are frivolous lawsuits. But they're doing it as Trump loyalists, and I suppose they have a right to do it, although it's wrong for them to undermine democracy by basically convincing millions of people on the basis of no evidence at all that there was something wrong with this election. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security, Trump's own Department of Homeland Security, has officially certified after a detailed study that no election in American history was conducted more securely, more safely, more effectively, and more reliably than this one.
Well, yet, Professor Tribe, yet close to 73 million people, those who voted for Trump, still support him, support perhaps his legal challenges, may believe that this election was stolen. How important is it for the legal process to play itself out? And will the Trump lawyers, seeing that their lawsuits aren't going anywhere, try to exploit any ambiguities in the law that give state legislatures the power to step in and appoint electors in the case of a failed election? Could Trump try to claim that this was a failed election?
Well, he can claim anything he wants, but there is no basis for it. He has, however, said he's going to try to persuade Republican legislatures to use a never-before-used power to simply name electors loyal to him. They won't do it. They've said they won't. Their own political careers would be devastated if they were to effectively disenfranchise the people of the states that they represent by tearing up their votes and naming Trump slates. It wouldn't succeed legally. I don't think it will happen politically. But again, it's part of the Trump narrative. He will say that the election was stolen in part because state legislatures wouldn't do what he asked and name electors who are committed to voting for him. And it is, I think, a tragic but sad, a tragic but undeniable reality that whatever he says, however baseless, will be believed by something like 70 million Americans. That is a unique circumstance, and it really undermines our democracy in ways that I hope President Biden can help to heal.
But because of this, is there a risk that so many Americans, millions of Americans, will start distrusting the legal system, just like they've lost trust in the integrity of the election?
Possible, but it does remain the case that the legal system, the judicial system, next to our military, is the most trusted set of institutions in the country. And I believe that in the long run, our chances of healing the deep wounds in the body politic will be greater if the courts continue to do their duty and basically dismiss lawsuits that are without any basis in fact or law. If they were to cave and simply say, well, maybe people will trust us more if we join Trump in lying about the facts, then we really will have lost everything that makes our republic hang together.
And what happens if Trump, we know Trump's term expires at noon on January 20th, and as some have already pointed out, the White House offers no late checkout, but are there any remedies if after that point, Trump continues to say that he is a legitimate president? And as surreal as it may sound in an American context, is there the risk of a coup? If not in the classical sense, is there a risk of having some armed militias loyal to Trump challenge overtly the authority of the state?
Well, I believe that Trump will, from a distance, perhaps Mar-a-Lago, perhaps somewhere else, continue to claim that he ought to have been the legitimate president. But I am not, in fact, worried that he will essentially encamp himself in the Oval Office and try to barricade it. The United States government will, in fact, be under the control of President Biden at that point. And anyone who pretends to exercise official federal authority after noon on January 20th, when their terms will have expired, will be committing a federal felony. I don't think that Trump will be able to get even people as loyal to him as Pompeo and Barr to risk federal prosecution by a Biden administration by going along with Trump's fantasy. I do think he'll continue, as autocrats the world over have often continued to claim in exile that they are the legitimate leader of the country. But I think at that point, less and less of his followers will continue to believe him. At least that's what I hope.
All right, Professor Lawrence Tribe, a great pleasure to have you on the
Pleasure to be
program. Thank
with
you
you.
so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And so with barely 2 months until the inauguration of the 46th President of the United States, the political drama engulfing the country is not about to end, even in light of the seemingly inescapable win of Joe Biden. The mixed messages of the president, despondent or defiant, are deepening a political crisis likely to last well after his departure from the White House. As House Majority Whip Clyburn said on this program last week, Trump will not succeed even if he doesn't concede. Although Trump may not succeed in remaining president, he may well have succeeded in sowing the seeds of Trumpism in a deeply divided country, in delegitimizing the Biden presidency in the eyes of a considerable segment of the electorate. And in so doing, he would have succeeded in eroding the cornerstone of American democracy, a bipartisan belief that America is the world's beacon of democracy. And so, in short, America may be losing that badge of honor, with its allies looking on in disbelief. That the possibility of a coup is openly discussed in the US is extraordinary in and of itself. America is proving that democracy is indeed fragile. That's all from me, Ghida Fakhry. Send us your thoughts, but for now, from me and the entire team here in Washington, thanks for watching.